Hello everyone, this is a very special presentation made with the help of Eckerd College students. We will be collaborating with students to find wellness topics that they're interested in and put them into presentation form to give you some great informative presentations. This presentation is going to focus on the 8 dimensions of wellness and was done with the help of Rose. Hawaii is the 50th state in the United States, and it's comprised of over 136 volcanic islets. It has 8 major islands and then 124 much smaller ones. Honolulu is the capital, and Hawaii is considered a unique melting pot of Southeast Asia, East Asia, and North American cultures, in addition to the indigenous Hawaiian culture. The first of the 8 dimensions that we're going to talk about is the physical dimension. The most common sport in Hawaii is actually surfing. Other common sports include baseball, football, marathons, windsurfing, cycling, swimming, and skiing. Just like in other areas of the United States, obesity rates have doubled since the mid-1900s, and 1 in 3 children going to kindergarten are actually obese. The state spends around $427 million on obesity-related care costs every year. Education is one of the major focuses to combat some of the obesity-related health care costs. The education system has 10 standards that include a minimum of 45 minutes a week for K through 3rd grade. This is active minutes, 55 minutes a week for 4th and 5th grade, and then it gets up to 200 minutes a week for 7th through 12th grade. So there's a lot of encouragement for families to be exercising outside of school as well. And there is a policy to not have longer than 2 hours of inactivity throughout a school day. So there are periodic breaks to get up and get moving around. Additionally, physical activity is not used as a punishment in Hawaii. 60% of adults participate in at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity a week. That's higher than mainland United States, so that's a good sign. 36% of adults are overweight, and 22% of adults are obese. Now, those aren't great numbers, but those are significantly better numbers than much of America and many other states. The state public health actions that are being taken to combat this are nutrition wellness policies for meetings and events, the Department of Human Services Business Enterprise Program to pilot healthy vending and marketing strategies for state concessions and vending operations, and a Healthways wellness policies to increase opportunities for physical activity. The next dimension that we're going to talk about is the spiritual dimension. 2 major religions today in Hawaii are Catholic and Protestant. Much of Hawaii celebrates the aloha spirit. This is a heightened awareness of being connected to everything and nurturing of oneself and self-greatness. All things, all conditions, all people, and all of nature were and are in pono, or excellence. Ho'oponopono ke ala, making right more right the path. These are some of the common spiritual phrases that you'll hear in Hawaii. Experiencing life by the moment is also part of the Ho'oponopono ke ala mentality, not letting fear-based mindsets control you. Another mantra that they live by is aloha lokahi, which is love and unity. Also I kanawai moaka aka, and that's the smiling law. Smiling on the world without judgment and taking responsibility for creation and your own decisions. Ho'oponopono, making rights the wrongs. This is the second form of teaching and promoting wellness and rightness. Choose to accept and then receive wellness. Largely unfamiliar to Hawaiians today due to missionary influence. And the last one, Ho'oponopono, making right more right. So this is weekly counseling in Hawaii family structure with elders to transmit wisdom, very positivity-based, aloha, loving, spiritual values, and a social wellness type value. So even though some of this has been lost as far as its very specific and rigid components, it does still kind of permeate throughout the culture. Just even if someone is Roman Catholic or Protestant, a lot of times they know of these actual sayings and values. Next, we'll move on to the emotional dimension of wellness. 3.2% of adults in Hawaii live with serious mental health conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and depression. It's ranked 16th out of the 50 United States in providing mental health care. Only 31.8% of Hawaiians with mental health problems receive treatment, public or private. Statewide, there is a low percentage of residents without health insurance as compared to the rest of the nation. And there's a huge amount of diversity from one community to the other. On one of the islands, Oahu, there's a 9-year gap life expectancy between two communities just 30 miles apart. So there are some drastic cultural differences and emotional differences within just short geographic locations. We're going to move on to the financial aspect of wellness. Two of the main industries in Hawaii are diversified agriculture and manufacturing. Research and development in oceanography, geophysics, astronomy, satellite communications, and biomedicine has been increasing steadily. The state ranks relatively low in marks like personal income, farm products sold, value of manufacturing shipments, retail sales, and bank deposits. Tourism is their overall largest industry, and there is a high cost of living in Hawaii, so most Hawaiians work more than one job just to be able to get by. Agriculture is very important to the local economy since they're so far away from everything. They have to make sure that they're growing a lot of their own food and getting it and distributing it throughout the island structure. They do not have any important mineral deposits, so that kind of hurts some of their outgoing industry as well. They rely on imported oil for almost all of its energy, but have been working to improve their renewable energy sector. It's a very unionized state. 25% of Hawaiians actually belong to a union. That seems like a pretty high number. The two most common are the International Longshore and the Warehouse Union. State taxes are collected under a centralized tax system, general excise tax, individual income tax, and federal grants and aid. Next, we're going to discuss the occupational dimension of wellness. Many Hawaiians are actually very involved in the U.S. military. There are some bases. It's a very strategic area. Obviously, we know about Pearl Harbor. As we mentioned earlier, the most common sport is surfing, so there's a lot of surf pros out of Hawaii, and they have large tournaments and competitions. So not only does that bring in the tourism, but it brings in the sport professionals. The top jobs in Hawaii are retail sales worker, food and beverage serving worker, and construction trade workers. So you can see the 2 out of the top 3 are very probably related to the tourism industry. The highest paid occupation are health practitioners, so doctors, and then top executives, lawyers, judges, and related workers, so high-level private or public sector workers. The fastest growing occupation in Hawaii is nursing, so that's very common to mainland United States, but also the psychiatric industry is growing pretty quickly in Hawaii as well. So the nursing industry is actually has a growth rate of 71% over the last 15 years. So that's humongous. In that same time span, all job growth has grown by 16%. Building, cleaning, and pest control workers are almost 2 points higher than the national average. A lot of that is because of tourism. Across occupations, gender distributions were very distinct. There's not a lot of just 50-50. It tends to be either male-dominated or female-dominated. Most jobs are more full-time than part-time. And technology jobs, STEM jobs, science, technology, engineering, and manufacturing, are growing slightly faster than non-STEM jobs. So the largest race group in STEM jobs that are increasing is the Asian race group. And it also tends to be more male than female. And a lot of millennials and Gen X make up these STEM jobs. Next, we will talk about the environmental dimension of wellness in Hawaii. One of the interesting topics in the environment is the sovereignty movement that started back in the 1980s. And this was where Native Hawaiians demanded legal restoration of sovereignty or reparations for the U.S. coming and taking over their kingdom. This hasn't been officially decreed, and Native Hawaiians still continue to demand land rights and more autonomy in their internal affairs, as well as the right to self-governance. One of the biggest issues for the environment in Hawaii is plastic. Camilo Beach of Hawaii has one of the largest plastic buildups in the world, and this is because it is inaccessible to get to this plastic, and it's been piling up for decades. So some places there are over 10-foot piles of plastic, and 15 to 30 tons of debris pile up each year, and 96% of that is plastic. As of today, 283 tons of plastic has been picked up from the shores of Hawaii, and mostly from this beach. Hawaii's wildlife has been hit hard by the plastic and the pollution that comes from it. Humpback whales are commonly found ensnared in fishing lines, turtles hooked in plastic bags, and fish with stomachs full of plastic. And there's big health repercussions because when tuna absorb the plastic into their fatty tissue, people eat the tuna. So they're just swallowing down a bunch of plastic. In 2015, Hawaii was the first state to completely ban plastic bags, and it has been the most aggressive state in reducing plastic consumption. In 2020, parts of Hawaii even banned single-use plastic food containers. Most experts think that unless there are big changes in corporate production and consumer use of plastic, places like Hawaii will get the brunt of the planet's dependency. Let's move on to the social dimension of wellness for Hawaii. So historically and originally, most Hawaiian natives came from Polynesia due to immigration, but now they are the minority. There is a large military population there, United States military population obviously, and Asians are actually the dominant population. The language spoken in Hawaii is very interesting. Officially, English and Hawaiian are co-languages, but most people speak what is called Hawaiian Creole English. And this is kind of a continuum of two languages. Most people know at least some Hawaiian and some English, and the communication between the groups on the islands is just kind of this fluid way of using language. It's very interesting. Most residents live in Oahu, which is the most densely populated city in Honolulu, and there's a lot of high-density clusters there. The Hawaiian culture is a mixture of Western and Eastern influences. For example, the Chinese New Year's is celebrated quite heavily in Hawaii, but so is the 4th of July. Native Hawaiian culture underwent a renaissance beginning in the 1970s, most notably with the resurgence of the hula, the voyaging canoe, the art of tattoo, and its music and language. Most Hawaiian inhabitants know at least some of Hawaiian words and observe cultural practices including the giving of the lei and a garland of flowers. The aloha spirit, however commercialized it has become, is reflective of the way that many diverse groups live together on the small islands. Appreciation for classical, modern, and experimental art forms is manifest in the attendance figures at galleries, film festivals, concerts, legitimate theater performances, and museums. Finally, let's talk about the intellectual dimension of wellness for Hawaii. Hawaii only has one school district, and the state government provides 84% of the public school's total revenue, which is the second highest in the nation. So there are both regular public schools and private charter schools, and Hawaii has the second highest private school attendance in the entire United States. They also spend more per pupil than any other West Coast state. Even though they spend more, they still have lower than average national testing scores, but they have a higher graduation rate than the national average. So kind of interesting dichotomy there. As far as advanced education institutions, there are some cultural and scientific institutions in Honolulu, one specifically Honolulu Academy of Art, where Western, Eastern, and Native art are studied, and some people have said this is some of the most beautiful art in the world. And then additionally, there is a major world astrology center on Mauna Kea Observatory, and it's a great place because there's so little light pollution to be able to observe the stars and learn about astronomy. We thank everybody for watching our special presentation on the 8 dimensions of wellness featuring Hawaii, and we especially thank Rose from Eckerd College for helping with the research in this project.